and welcome to Because School Means More, the podcast where we explore what true inclusion looks like in schools and how we can make it a reality. Each episode will share real stories, practical strategies, and insights from schools that are leading the way in inclusive education. Whether you're an educator, a parent, or someone passionate about inclusion, this podcast is for you. Everyone is welcome here. Because School Means More is brought to you by the Inclusion Partnership. My name's Jo Wilkinson and I'm the Inclusion Partnership Manager and podcast host. I'm joined by some co-hosts and guests for each episode. Our mission is to create real change by building an inclusion movement, a network of schools and organisations committed to inclusive relationships and inclusive provision for every child. Join us as we break down barriers, share success stories and work together to build schools where everyone belongs.
Because school means more.
Hello and welcome to today's podcast. Here we are back for series 2. Hello Phil.
Hello Jo.
Here we are back again. Loved recording series 1 Because School Means More, so much so that we've decided to come back and record some more to share some inclusive stories from schools in Derby. So we've got a whole set of new schools that are going to join us for this series and share about their different approaches. So really excited to hear about them. But this episode is really an update around our own story as an inclusion partnership and where we've got to with the work. So just to properly introduce ourselves, Phil, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Great. Hi, Jo. I'm Phil. I am chair of the Inclusion Strategy Group, which is an absolute privilege and honour to do. And I'm also a head teacher of a secondary school called Aldercar High School. I should say Aldercar High School.
Brilliant. And I am Jo Wilkinson, the Inclusion Partnership Manager. So love what I do and love working with so many schools in Derby to support this work and to get the Inclusion Charter embedded across schools.
And I think we're excited, aren't we?
Always
It's been
excited.
a year since we started the podcast and
Yeah,
we've had a bit of a break.
We've
and
come
I'm
a long way in a year.
excited for series 2.
So let's go, shall we?
Let's do it.
Now, we've got a wheel behind us for those of you that are watching, but in a minute you'll be able to hear it if you're just listening. But this is something that we used at our inclusion conference last year, our Wheel of Inclusion, to help pull out some different questions about what it means to be an inclusive school. So much so that we've brought it with us for our podcast today. So Phil, I'm going to let you be the first one to spin it.
Okay.
And see where it lands for us to see what check-in question we might want to do. Question 4. So then, Phil, question 4 is asking, who was your favourite teacher and how? What made them special?
Wow. As a check-in question, that's a tough one.
That's a big one.
I've got to admit, I would probably say my maths teacher called Mrs. Pugh. And I would say that she was probably the only teacher in school that got me. I wasn't a fan of school, to be fair. And I think that's why I went into education and, probably, moved up to be head and have influence in schools. Because for me, school didn't quite work. But she was great. She kind of got me. She was my maths teacher and she kind of just let me kind of self-discover things, and she just let me, I suppose, do maths on my own. There was about 2 or 3 of us and we just were allowed to, I can't say play's the wrong word, it wasn't play, it was just to go and explore and discover maths as away from that kind of stereotypical of we're going to do loads of questions out of the book. And for me it was really, really quite useful.
And probably played a big role in you going on to train to be a maths teacher.
Yeah,
maybe.
something like that. What about you, Jo?
For me, I think school wasn't necessarily my favourite place, but definitely where I had that sense of belonging was with teachers that I felt understood me and made me feel welcome. So the example I'll share is Mr. Stuckey, who was my design teacher. Yeah, really tall guy, I remember that much, but he was brilliant at always talking to you as an individual, recognising your strengths and really pushing and encouraging you to do things differently. So he really put me at ease, and actually that was a subject that I followed all the way through and really loved the creativity around it and everything that he encouraged around that. So Brilliant. Mr. Stuckey is definitely my one that springs to mind.
Brilliant. Right, time for check-in number 2.
Right, come on then, let's spin the wheel. We need a different question now. Oh, question 12.
Number 12. Oh, is it bordered on 11 or 12?
12, I'd say.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a nice simple one. Beach holiday, city holiday.
Beach holiday or city holiday? I think probably I would go with Well, I'd love a bit of both really, but I'm probably going to say beach holiday in terms of the proper switch off. But I'd still want there to be some things to go and explore nearby and do nearby. But for me, I think you can't beat that experience of being on the beach, hearing the sea, and just completely switching off and relaxing.
Right.
What about you?
Do you know what? I think that's where we are finally attuned. I think, I do love a city break, but I think there's nothing better than a bit of sand and a bit of sea and a bit of sun and just proper chilling out.
There you go then. So that's our check-in questions done.
Great.
Okay, so let's move on then, just to update around the context and the challenges that we're aware of that we're facing through this work. So it's a year ago since we did series 1 of the podcasts. A lot's happened in that year.
A lot has happened.
So let's go from last year's inclusion conference, which is where we shared series 1 of the podcasts. We launched our strategy. We did an update to the inclusion charter, which obviously we'll go through this podcast in a bit more detail, but just give us a bit of a summary.
I think for me, when we could even start, I suppose 5 years ago when we first started working together, that if I think about KLE's key lines of inquiry, back in 2022, we were solely focused on permanent suspensions, permanent exclusions and suspensions. And actually, as the work's developed, particularly over this year, we've got a whole host of KLEs that we are working on and with colleagues across the city and schools, which just goes to show very quickly, I think, about how not only what impact we've had across the city, but how that influence can have wider impact within schools as well. So, and
I think that's been the big shift for us over the last 12 months around anchoring in that work within the entire city-wide approach, through Derby City Council and through the partner organisations, through the Inclusion Strategy Group, to really get clarity. And I think probably a year ago was probably the first point beyond the opportunity area funding that we could start to think a bit more long term.
Yeah.
We'd got some dedicated partners around the table through the strategy group. We'd got some funding agreements in place that was not a huge amount of funding, but enough for the infrastructure to be able to look beyond a year-on-year basis. So that allowed us to develop that 5-year strategy, didn't it?
Yeah, and I think for me, part of the opportunity areas was always about legacy and sustainability. And even though we had a legacy, we weren't kind of committed to sustainability because to a certain extent we were trying to find funding from different pots each year, whereas we're in a really fortunate position. And this year's been, almost, it has been really embryonic with regards to we've got secured long-term funding from the local authority and other partners as well, which is great. We've established the ISG, which is the Inclusion Strategy Group, as being the voice for all schools across the city, and that feeds directly into the local area inclusion partnership board. And to have that kind of flow and that kind of influence and be able to support at that level, I think is a really, really important thing for us. And that's kind of like structurally great. But on top of that, we're still doing all the great work with regards to providing training, providing development, providing challenge to a certain extent, with regards to what we do with regards to inclusion and that inclusive approach in schools.
Let's just talk about the challenges, because we're fully aware that the challenges absolutely are out there. Inclusion is definitely high profile, both nationally and in the local picture as well. But in terms of what we've agreed as a strategy group, we've agreed that we will continue to use key lines of inquiry in the city to help shape, develop, challenge the work that we're doing. So you mentioned that the opportunity area work initially was very focused on permanent exclusion and suspensions, but it's so much more than that now as well, isn't it? With data around attendance, elective home education, part-time timetables, alternative provision placements, and everything fundamentally that can then contribute to in terms of number of NEET children. And ultimately, we're trying to use that data to help inform our planning and our ongoing development to ensure that we can work more effectively together, to ultimately allow every child to have that sense of belonging at school and to be able to thrive in school. And that's what the strategic plan has helped us to do, is to set that vision over the next 5 years. And we were excited to be able to launch that at the conference last June alongside these podcasts.
And I think one thing that we are fully aware of is that schools are beautiful places and schools are great places to be, but actually we're also aware that schools are very challenging as well. And that's not just here in Derby City. Nationally, when you look at the pictures and you look at the data, it goes to show that schools can be challenging. So yes, we are talking about inclusion and inclusive approaches, but we're also having that that mindset and that kind of appreciation for the fact that not everything's going to work in every organisation at every time. Particularly things like, there is that national increase in elective home education, part-time timetables. We know we've got big government change with regards to the consultation on the white paper that's going on at the moment, and obviously Ofsted's link to inclusion. I think the word inclusion is listed 74 times in the toolkit. So there is a philosophy and a feeling that inclusive practice is being talked about more. For us, I think and this is probably your phrase, it's about how we go from the knowing to the doing.
Absolutely, and then ultimately to the being as well, where it's a truly embedded inclusive culture in every school, and each school will have their own journey to get to that point. But I think the philosophy bit is a really good phrase to use, Phil, because the inclusion charter is about schools pledging to commit to the philosophy and principles around what an inclusive school looks like. So again, a year ago at the inclusion conference, we sort of shared the inclusion charter as something that we'd refreshed and revisited, shaped fully around two key foundations. So we've got inclusive relationships, all about relational approaches, and inclusive provision, and 5 key principles running off those two foundations to really start to help schools to understand what we mean by an inclusive school. And I think the new work that we're doing now around an inclusion reflective toolkit will help schools to really reflect, and I think that word is a really key word, on what they are doing around inclusion and what more they could do and what their next steps are. So I think we're at a really good point, and it's a really exciting time for us. Like I say, we know the challenges are out there, but what's brilliant is schools in Derby are committed to wanting to make that difference. And as an infrastructure, we know that we're there for the foreseeable future to continue to help develop and then embed that work with every school. And I think the turning point as well that we saw at last year's conference was we very much put the spotlight on Derby schools for them to share what they are doing. And that's where some schools are at that doing stage as well as the knowing stage, where they're able to share those stories and those approaches. And the podcast last year enabled us to capture that, and we'll capture more through this next series.
I'm excited for series 2. And I think you're right there, Joe. There's a lot of great practice in and around the city, and it's, I think it's one of our jobs, really, one of our roles and responsibilities is to make sure that we identify that, celebrate it, give them recognition and share it with other schools. And even, the first thing that springs to mind is with regards to the coaching circle model and the training that's been taking place this year. We've forged that really great relationship with Carl Manor, who, to a certain extent, if I can use they're kind of like holding hands with us at this point in time, with getting across the philosophy. But there's a lot of schools already that can see the theoretical impact that it can have on a community with regards to driving that culture and that feeling of belonging. And there's some really brave schools. I think there's 5, is it, at this point in time?
Yeah, that are embedding coaching circles.
That are embedding elements of coaching circles, or just actually gone for a full launch of coaching circles.
Yeah.
And it'll be really interesting as we go through this year as well. We've got a touch base now because there's 3 great videos, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point in one of our podcasts. There's videos of great practice that's already taking place across the city, but it'd be interesting to see where that goes as well this time next year as we get more schools on board and it's embedded over a longer period of time.
And as a network, we've embraced coaching circles as well, haven't we? So we reflected on our inclusion network meetings to think about, well, how do we really help enable true networking and sharing of practice? So we now run those as a coaching circle model. And through those coaching circle models, it ensures that everybody has a voice and has the opportunity to share some challenges, but then also as a group to kind of work through solutions and share some different approaches. And the feedback that we've had from schools that have come to that is that's been really powerful for them to go away feeling inspired, motivated, with new ideas that they can then help go and develop in their own setting.
And I can talk personally, as a head that's launched coaching circles in a school, but not only for young people, but for staff and for training, it's really, really impactful from a personal point of view. And I think when we did that first inclusion leaders meeting where we put it in circles and we got colleagues to discuss not only cross phase, but also within primary and secondary sector, there was a real great atmosphere and buzz in the room with regards to sharing practice and coming together collaboratively to look at challenges and solutions.
Yeah.
So that's something that we're already committed to sticking to, which is great.
And we're going to give it a try on a larger scale at the conference this June and have coaching circles running for 300 people all at once, discussing about different inclusive approaches. So that'll be a really interesting one, first of all, to see how that works, but to really give everyone the opportunity to interact and share and learn from each other, I think will be really powerful. Coaching circles, should we talk about a bit more in terms of the filming that we've done recently?
Let's go for it.
So, like you mentioned, Carl Manor have delivered some intense, in-depth training across Derby schools. Some schools were lucky enough to go up to Carl Manor to go and see it in practice. I'm a strong believer that seeing is believing, and sometimes going to see it and understand it, truly when it's up and running, that's when you can see how it really is working, making a difference. I was one of the ones that went up to Carl Manor to see that in practice. But more recently, I was able to visit 3 other schools in Derby that have been potentially probably 9 to 12 months into that journey in terms of embedding coaching circles in their own setting. And it's just one of the best days that I've spent work-wise. I'm lucky that I love every day at work. But
why was that? What made it special?
It was special in terms of hearing staff voice and children's voice talking about why they love it. And it was absolutely seeing is believing in terms of you got that feeling, and I think that's where it hit you. And it was beautiful to use that word to kind of hear children talking about why they love coaching circles and the opportunity it gives them to get to know other children that ordinarily they wouldn't meet. I think one benefit that I hadn't thought through was children talked about how they also see some of their other coaching circle out and about in the community and how they meet and greet each other and how they know that there's always someone there to support them. So everything that we've talked about and wanted and hoped that it would achieve, it was really clear that that was happening and more actually. And talking to staff was interesting in terms of they all talked about their nervousness around doing something quite different and how it would be received by other members of staff. And they felt that they had to be brave, but boy, were they glad that they had been brave and done something different. And I think one school summed it up beautifully that she was saying, she hadn't necessarily got the data to demonstrate that it was making a difference, but she absolutely knew and felt that it was making a difference. And she could see that. And an interesting story around a parent of a child in that school, and the child's coming home and talking about coaching circles and being a real highlight of their week, to the extent now that parent is a teacher in a different school and has now come to the training to look to implement that in their own setting as well. So should we just talk about what coaching circles are as a quick summary? Would that be useful?
Or do we not want to spoil a later podcast?
Oh, wow, we have got a whole podcast on it. But if we could summarise it in a couple of sentences, what would you say? To put you on the spot.
I would say that the natural form of a circle with no table, no distractions like phones or computers builds that genuine sense of community, where everybody has the opportunity to listen, everybody has the opportunity to speak and get involved with it if they want to, because there are really clear inclusive rules, and if I could use that, kind of like flows within how those coaching circles will work. But I think from a higher level as well, for adults and young people to have that opportunity to do a check-in the first part of the week, a check-up during the week, and then a check-out, before they go away and leave school for a weekend or a holiday, I think is breathtaking, really. And look forward to the podcast where we go into more detail about it.
Yeah, no, and we'll share those films as well on our website. So would encourage people to take a look, and not quite the same as going into schools and seeing it, but they really did capture those films about the impact that it's having and how worthwhile it's been for schools that are doing that. Yeah,
and I think also moving on from coaching circles with the things that we've done in a year, we've still had over 250 members of staff that have attended training and development sessions that we've put on across the city. Yeah, and so there's lots and lots that's happened in the past year, Joe, as you are fully aware. But one thing we've not managed to talk about in great detail is the inclusion reflection toolkit, which we've probably been working on for about 12 months now. We've really wanted to create a resource for all schools across the city where they can have some guidance about how they critique's probably too harsh word, how they review, celebrate, and challenge and reflect about what inclusive practice is in their school, but also give themselves the opportunity to then set themselves some targets and think about, well, what do we need and what support do we need, whether it's externally or internally, to become more inclusive. So I think for me, we're going to launch that at the conference, which I'm really, really excited about. And it will be that encouragement from everybody within the Inclusion Partnership, from the local authority, to get as many schools as we can to have a go at that reflection toolkit. There's lots of advantages about that as well, that it will not only help the schools individually, and for me, we've spent a lot of time linking it to national research, the white paper, obviously Ofsted's Ofsted toolkit, but also with regards to our own inclusion charter. So we think it's a really, really detailed opportunity, a detailed toolkit where schools can really, really get reflective, but we will have access to that as well. So as an inclusion partnership, we can be able to bring schools together where we've got great practice or where there's some areas that schools are asking for development from, but also it'll help us as Inclusion Strategy Group think about what training and development we offer moving forward into the future. And for me, I'm really, really excited about it. So all I would say to listeners is please look out for it.
So in November this year, we're actually running a citywide Insect Day. So we've got an agreement across the city for a common closure day. About 70 schools in the city have committed. And the idea is that all staff, so from across all different roles in the school workforce, so it will be school leaders, teachers, teaching assistants, pastoral staff, school and office staff, premises staff, business managers. I've probably forgotten different categories there, but the beauty with that day is that we might have the best part of 2,500 people together. So just have to find the confidence a little bit to get on the stage for that one.
I can feel the nerves already.
But it's nerves of excitement as well, really, because like what a special thing that is, and I don't think that exists anywhere else in the country. No. For us to bring that number of people together, purely dedicated to talking about inclusion, particularly around the work of the Inclusion Charter, that will be a really exciting day.
But we've got some great speakers, haven't we? And I think
we've got some brilliant speakers lined up.
You know, we had some challenges, and rightly so, from our partners with regards to the conference is great, and there's about 350 people at that conference. But our challenge wasn't it? How do we get that message in from heads, deputies, Senkos, mental health leads who attend the conference down to that kind of, down to the classroom level and the kind of the workforce level of every single person. So that's where this whole idea came from. And we've been to look at where the event is, and we are nervous, we're excited, but we've got some really great presenters and speakers, and also there's that opportunity, isn't there? So we've got a more formalized morning event, and then in the afternoon there's opportunities as well for some wider networking, groups coming together to have bespoke training or kind of like group training on certain topics that I think is really, really exciting. And as you said, this is
another level.
Exciting. It's another level, and hopefully it just keeps pushing inclusion. And
I think really important to say that's a free day for schools. There isn't a cost for schools and for school staff to access that, which is an amazing offer. And we're very grateful to the funding that we get through council and through our school strategic groups and Derby County Community Trust to help make that day happen. But so exciting that we've got a citywide commitment to that day, and to have that number of staff there in one day will be amazing. And I think already we're starting to say to ourselves, it can't be seen as being a standalone day, and we're doing the so what and the next and where do we go with it. And that's where we start to think about future training. But let's just talk a little bit more about the morning, because we have got some brilliant keynote speakers lined up.
And I think one of the things that's really special for me is that we've worked with the DFE, and the DFE are joining us. We've got Sir Kevin Collins coming, which is going to be amazing. And I think, myself as a school leader, I will just go and watch him anywhere. So the fact that he's in Derby, I think is a really, really special thing. We've got Richard Gerver. So Richard
being local and already has supported some of our work and aware of our work, but author, international speaker. So very lucky that Richard's going to compare the morning part for us. Hopefully we'll have a bit of a giggle with Laughology.
We will.
So we've got Steph Davis that's doing a bit of a warm-up act for us to get the whole audience ready and engaged.
And I think our main, if I could say that, the main focus is through Mark Finnis. And, we've had the opportunity to see him at a conference in Leeds, and he blew my mind. He's a really great presenter, and he's well researched, and he's really experienced as a senior school leader himself. So I think that for me is going to be really, really interesting. And
Mark, again, he understands the local picture. He's aware of the inclusion charter. He's aware of the structure that we've got, and he's really excited and really sees that it's a huge positive step that we've got this citywide inset day that's taking place. He travels all over the country and says that something like this doesn't exist elsewhere. So it's a really good opportunity for us.
And we can't also forget the duo.
The double act. Yeah, me and you.
We're there.
Presenting as well. So we'll talk to schools about the inclusion charter. What do we mean by inclusive relationships and inclusive provision? We'll reference the inclusion charter and the inclusion reflection toolkit as part of that.
And try and tie it together.
And tie it all together. And very much signpost schools. So I think what's really important to me is that it's not a one-off standalone event. We know that this training isn't going to, be a magic wand to change that delivery, but it's almost a next step for us. And then from then, it's about how do we continue to support this wider workforce to make that difference in school. And the signposting that will come from that around further training, networking, but also the work that we'll continue to do with Mark Finnis.
Great.
So the phrase Mark used, which I think really resonated with me, was around moving from the knowing stage. And I absolutely think we're there in the city around knowing what do we mean by relational and restorative practice, moving into the doing stage. So how is that embedded as part of everyday practice? And do we see that approach consistently applied in schools? And then moving into the being stage, which is really about that it's clearly embedded in culture, policies, practice. And that's where the Inset Day is called Inclusion, Everyone, Every Day, Everywhere. And ultimately it is about everyone being part of one inclusion movement and committed to making sure every child in the city belongs and thrives in education.
Indeed.
And I think it's a phrase that we've talked about and used quite a lot as part of our everyday language, but we shouldn't take for granted that next step, which is a big next step for us, but really exciting to see where we go.
And I know we're miles off this, but we've already had calls from other senior leaders saying, well, can this be an annual event? And I think that's something we'll let's get through the first one and then we'll decide that. But I think, the other thing that we probably need to talk about in here is just very quickly is that, the work, you do, we do is about future-proofing Derby as well and Derby schools. And, delighted at this point to say that, we've got Mark Finnis, who after the conference is going to pull together almost like a year-long Derby-specific course where there's going to be 8 day sessions for senior leaders. There's the opportunity for him to go in and do inset days in schools. And even though that's in that kind of embryonic stage, that's really, really exciting because I think when we've reviewed and when, we've been challenged about the work that we do, and rightly so, we believe that we've done the knowing part. We've got the vast majority of schools are in that doing part. And I think this will help more schools get into the doing part and even going into that being element as well. So the future's quite exciting with regards to lots of inclusion focus.
Let's talk about the cake we had yesterday, because we celebrated something special yesterday.
We did. 5 years.
Sounds like we're cutting a wedding cake. We celebrated, 5 years since we started this work. And about 3.5 years ago, we launched the Inclusion Charter. Very much a concept and idea that we developed together around, I think schools would pledge to some principles around an inclusive school. We didn't know what the commitment would be, but we went out there and we asked schools to sign up to the Inclusion Charter. But we were absolutely delighted that last week we reached that 100% mark. So 106 schools in the city have all signed up to the Inclusion Charter. In addition to that, we've got colleges locally that have signed the Inclusion Charter. We've got some schools that are on the border that are interested in becoming part of the Inclusion Charter as well.
it was an amazing accomplishment. I remember when you phoned me to let me know we'd got that 106 school. It is something special because it means that we can genuinely say that we're a city, that we are a city all with the same focus on inclusive practice. And I think that's really, really special.
So what would you say is the one thing that you're most proud of around this work?
Wow. I think for me, when I first came into the city back in 2017, I would say schools were working in silos and it was almost a self-protection. And I know there's lots of pressures that schools have, whether that be external or internal or political. But actually now, I think that whole collaborative approach that we've got, where schools are opening their doors, schools are sharing resources and sharing ideas.
Yeah.
And also, it's taking our hats off and recognising the fact that schools are trying some innovative things. And sometimes they don't work, but actually they're being brave to do that. And that's quite special because you do see it have an impact on our young people. Yet again, some of the videos that we've seen that we've managed to capture when you listen to the children and the staff saying, this is right, this is just the right thing to do, I think is really, really special. So for me, that collaboration and that shared goal that this is Derby children.
So as a school leader then, what would be your advice for listeners or some top tips if they were thinking about embracing this work themselves and supporting inclusion? I
think there's two things for me. Going back to 2022 when Dave Whitaker started talking, and a lot of school leaders were kind of like drawn in, and rightly so, to that phrase of unconditional positive regard. I think there needs to be a genuine investment into that, because you'll talk to school leaders, and I don't think we've ever met a school leader that says they're not inclusive.
Yeah.
But it's about how we are genuinely inclusive, and I think that real investment into getting the philosophy of unconditional positive regard, and that isn't about, some school leaders think that's about being soft. It's not. The phrase of soft front, hard back. We all know trauma-informed practice is about boundaries and expectations as much as it is about being warm and understanding and showing empathy and flexible, etc., etc. So for me, it's that. And then I suppose the second tip would be to really invest in an inclusion graduated response. Okay. For me, with regards to the schools that have invested in getting an inclusion graduated response in place and thinking about what is our core offer, what do we all commit to make sure that core offer works, and then for our young people that may still have struggles with that core offer, what interventions are we going to put in place? Who's going to deliver those interventions? How are we then going to assess if it's having impact? And therefore, what does that lead to? Does that lead to a further intervention, a repeat of an intervention? So for me, where schools have got inclusion graduate responses and they've really invested in that core offer, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and it was fascinating to see the white paper had almost stolen what we've been doing with regards to that. For me, would be my big tip, because that is, it's time, money and resource really, really well spent.
And I think, for me, when I've been in schools recently and talked to them about their inclusive approach and how they felt about it and what their top tips were, that phrase, be brave, was used in nearly every instance. And I think that's where we now are in that supportive environment to hopefully enable schools and school leaders to be brave and to try something different. I think it's really important and definitely a top tip that I've picked up on.
And I think the kind of shift has been, and rightly so, that I would even say a couple of years ago, nationally, people would see the word inclusion. They think it was just SEND. And actually, we know that inclusion is more than SEND. It's relational, it's mental health, it's attendance. There's a whole things that go into that that inclusive approach, and that's why a good inclusion graduate response has support for all those different elements. Weave together, colleagues talking about young people and how they can support them, and genuinely doing something about it.
Amazing. Should we spin the wheel again then for a checkout question?
It's there.
Who's going to go first then?
You go first. Come on.
Right, I'm going to spin it. What we got? Question 5.
Number 5. This is an interesting one.
Okay.
What do you think the inclusion partnership superpower is?
What do I think the inclusion partnership superpower is? Oh gosh, help me out here. collaboration. Can we use that as another word again?
Going back to it.
Being inclusive, I think. We are that warm and welcoming space, a safe space, I think, for schools to be able to turn to for support and guidance and ideas and resources. And potentially that we have been brave to go out and do something different and put that message and that infrastructure across the city. It's not really a superpower as such, is it? But
No, but it can be.
Okay.
It should be.
Yeah. What would you say then?
With regards to the inclusion partnership and
superpower.
It's about bringing everything together. I think it's how we've managed to really shine a light and make inclusive practice a beacon within that knowing phase. That for me, I think, has been our superpower. It's almost been, you could almost look at anybody part of the inclusion partnership and cut them down the middle, not as you'd want to, and you'd see the word inclusion.
Yeah. I mean, when people ask me outside of this field of work what I do as a job, I very much describe myself as being a Pritt stick, don't I? Like, I'm the glue that brings it together. So maybe that's my superpower in terms of related to this work, is having the dedicated time to help join up the different organisations and services and the work that we're collectively doing. But collaboration, there you go.
Great,
Go on, then. 6. So, how would you explain what makes your work special to a family member or friend that knows nothing about it?
Wow. So I was at a meeting at Derby University, and as I'd finished the meeting, I came down to the reception. I got met by this young person. She was 21. She was beaming. She got a really big grin on her face, smile on her face. And she went, "Oh my God, it's Mr. Smith. I'm so glad to see you. How are you?" Da, 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 da. And, throughout my career, 5 years ago or so, however many years ago, like 9 years ago, you're not going to recognise anybody. But she was so genuinely warm. And she started thanking me, and I felt a bit embarrassed because I was in the reception at Derby University, and she's going, "Oh my God, what you guys did at Coda for me." She said, I found life was really difficult for me, and the support you gave, the belief you gave in me to get me ready." And she was super proud that she'd started on a law degree.
Amazing.
So you can't really describe that without doing stories like that, but sometimes we don't do it for that, but that sometimes is useful for us to reflect and remind ourselves about the power of what we do on a daily basis that we probably don't know that we're doing. So it comes back to that impact on young people and young people's lives.
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably sometimes quite difficult to explain. But I think ultimately, in real simple terms, I talk about my role is really to help schools, to help children and young people. And for me, I always knew I wanted to play a role and have a job that involved working with children and young people, and to do that through a network of schools, through providing the opportunities that we do, through training, support, networking, advocacy. I think, like I said a minute ago, that's where I'm the glue that tries to bring that together. And really lucky that I get this role and love what I do, because I can see the difference it's making. And I think that's what's really important to me in terms of my own philosophy and principles, is to know that we are making a difference. And I think summing up this podcast now, Phil, in terms of the update where we're at, we've come a long way in 12 months, come a long way in 5 years. But it's been really lovely to try and capture that, and hopefully people have enjoyed having a listen. So thank you very much for joining us. And here's to the next batch of schools coming in to share their journey, and for these next episodes for podcast series 2.
Podcast series 2, here we come.
That's a wrap for this episode of Because School Means More, brought to you by the Inclusion Partnership. We hope today's conversation gave you new insights, ideas and inspiration to help make schools more inclusive for everyone. Real change happens when we work together. So, if you're inspired by what you heard today, we'd love for you to be part of the inclusion movement. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Share this episode with colleagues and connect with the Inclusion Partnership. Thanks for listening.
Because school means more.